A lot of people don't understand that, I've sat on so many panels with people who don't understand what it's like to be a Black transgender person in America. And that's fine. But when you're honest about that, instead of covering it up with hate, then we can have those conversations and we can have that dialogue and we can get some comprehension and some understanding. But I want people, cisgender, heteronormative, religious Black folks to understand that, what I'm about to say is really about to piss some people off, and that's fine.
Welcome to the Networking with Michelle podcast, the show dedicated to providing you with life strategies with a little bit of entrepreneur advice. Here we believe in the Jim Rohn quote, success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every day. Hey everyone, welcome to the Networking with Michelle show. I'm your host, Michelle Gomez, and this is episode 5, Perspective of Black Lives. And I, once again, continue to stretch myself, continue to open the platform to discuss the difficult topics, 1, 2, maybe even the taboo topics. But more importantly, I open up the platform to discuss the necessary topics. We know this is June. As June comes to a close, this is also Pride Month. And there's so many directions that I could go into when it comes to LGBT in this month of June, but I thought it was really important to highlight trans individuals. And I get into this with my guest. And once again, we know Black Lives Matter. More importantly, all Black Lives Matter. And that includes our LGBTQ folk and definitely our trans folks, right? Our transgender people. And unfortunately, trans women are dying at an alarming rate, which is totally ridiculous and is concerning in so many regards. And they're dying by cis heterosexual heteronormative men is very disheartening, to say the least. And once again, in this crazy time of racial uprising, say her name, protect Black women, trans women continue to get lost. And transgender people continue to get lost in this shuffle. And I don't think that's right. I don't think that's fair. And we're going to discuss it on this episode. So this is a beautiful conversation I had with my good friend, Kaleb Elijah. And we talk about life. We talk about life. We deep into spirituality and religion. And I think you should listen to this conversation. That's what I think. I think you should listen to it. I think you should think about it. And if you want, you can hit me up. But maybe, just maybe, it will change your actions. It will change your thoughts. It will change your behavior. And it will open you up to have a conversation with someone else. And more importantly, be respectful when you do come across a transgender person. So without further ado, Kaleb Elijah. Today's special guest is Kaleb Elijah, good friends here in Houston, Texas. And I want to talk about, we always say all Black Lives Matter or Black Lives Matter.
Correct.
It's very important for me to say that all Black Lives Matter, but
Correct.
that including Black trans lives matter.
Correct.
And that is why I have my friend today. So Kaleb, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Absolutely. I'm great. Thank you for having me for such a timely and necessary conversation. So I commend you for the bravery to even have this conversation. So just thank you so much for being inclusive with your platform. I appreciate that.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. And I think the good thing about this one, I believe in having the tough conversations. And two, it's a pleasure to know you, right? Because this can be a touchy subject. And it's like, who do you go to have
Right.
an honest conversation? So I'm glad we were already in relationship
Right.
to
Absolutely.
have this conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I know you got a lot. You have a business like and Prosper too that I've been able to
Yeah.
support. But just go ahead and tell people a little bit about you, and then we can go into your journey.
As you know it, she said, my name is Kaleb Elijah. My pronouns are he, him, and his. And so I'm 36 years old. I'll actually be 37 next month. So excited about that, and just excited about my journey. I'm originally from Louisiana. And so I moved to Houston in 2007. And so in 2007 is when I began my transition physically. It's also when I began my transition as an activist and an advocate um, for marginalized people. Period. And so that's African Americans, that's the LGBT community as well. And so I've been doing that. Also, like you said, I have my own business, which is Lake and Prosper. It is a jewelry business. And so, with that business, I have made it a point to not gender my jewelry. Because I want my brand to be a representation of who I am, and that is that everyone is included in the spectrum of life. So that is what my brand means to me. And so we talk about intersections, and it's been kind of tough navigating that as well as a business owner and being an activist as well, because you don't want to exclude because it's all of who you are, but they're separate entities as well. And so I try to find that balance with that. But I'm just here. In the community, I'm mostly often represent the spiritual aspect of the community, where others may represent the political aspect and speak from a political aspect. But it's so important that we have spiritual teachers and spiritual advisors within our African American LGBTQI community. And so I think that is something that we'll definitely get into as we have this conversation. So that's just a little bit about who I am. What you see is what you get. I'm strong in my beliefs, but I think that we are at a time where if you have a platform, if you have a voice, it's time to put up or shut up and actually stand for whatever your brand represents. And I think we're seeing that with corporate America as well.
Yeah. So can you give us a little bit, or tell us as much as you would like to share in regarding your transition story?
Well, I mean, ever since I was a child, I knew, who I was. I knew that I was different. Growing up in Louisiana, where, it's, the traditional Black church. My mother was a musician, and I was born and raised in a small town where everyone knew my family as well. And so I battled with that. I battled with that, knowing how I felt, but also knowing how I was raised in the gender that was presented to my parents, and so that was always a struggle for me. And so, just fast forward to my adult years, I made the decision that I needed to live for me. And so I began to do that. I didn't take the traditional route as a lot of trans people do, who give their family the option to say that I don't support you and you're not welcome here. I made sure that I was financially stable on my own. Um, and I just made the decision to be me. And so 3 years ago, um, actually 4 years ago, my mother was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, which is a rare blood cancer. And 3 years ago, she passed. And so um, I I had realized that um, I felt that I was not living my truth. And so when I say that, I mean, I was living who I wanted to be for me, but I had not expressed that publicly out of fear. And so it really struck me when my mother was diagnosed with cancer. Do I want my mother to leave this earth without us having that conversation? You know, and so we had the conversation. It was so amazing because she already knew. You know, I had physically changed before her eyes, and it made me realize, to Michelle, that within our Black communities, I don't think that parents give us the benefit of the doubt that no matter what, you know, our gender, our sexual orientation is, we are still who they raise us to be. And then we don't give our parents the benefit of the doubt to have those hard conversations because of what we witness and what we think that may be. And so for me, losing my mother, but knowing that I lost my mother, telling her the truth, it changed my life tremendously. It gave me the confidence to actually be who I am in whatever space that I'm at. And in that, um, we have to understand that being who you are doesn't mean that you have to tell everyone who you are, and you don't have to go into those private details about things that you're not comfortable with. But it's about showing up in the world and showing up to walk in your purpose. Because no matter whether you're transgender, lesbian, heterosexual, I think that we're all in those spaces to show up and to bring and speak truth to power into whatever room that we're in.
Absolutely. Because you stated you know from a young age. So can you take us back a little bit, maybe as a teenager, when I say that because we're cognizant at that point, right? But I guess how were you able to determine between your gender identity and your sexuality?
Sexuality.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. I remember this story. So we were, you know, in the South, we always like had a barbecue or something like that. Mm-hmm. So I had to be about 7 years old, Michelle, and got off the bus end of summer. My family's having a barbecue. And so you remember the little kiddie pools, the little blue kiddie pools. And so, you know, I went and all my cousins, which I had mostly male cousins, you know, they went and they put their swim trunks on or whatever. And so I go in my room and I put some shorts on and I run outside with no shirt on. Okay. And so my parents and my aunts, they were like, oh my God, no. Girls, you have to this. And so that's where it starts. Yeah. Because it's like when you really think about it, as a child, you're just operating in, you know, what feels natural to you. And so it was always a battle with my mom, like, don't put a dress on me. Don't, you know, it was always that battle as far as identity. And so then when you reach your teenage years, because I can be honest, in my teenage years, I didn't know nobody transgender. You know, high school. I had cousins who were openly, they were butch, they were stud. And so, you know, you go through that and you're like, oh, well, this must be what this is. You know what I'm saying? Oh, this is what this is. I'm attracted to women. You know what I'm saying? This is my gender. This is what this must be. And so it wasn't until I got to college and I began to, you know, when you go to college, you're exposed to, you know, all kinds of people or whatever. And so I was exposed to more people within the trans community. And so I kind of began to understand more from a psychological level in maturity of, okay, this is what it is that I feel. And then you go back and you're looking at your childhood and you're beginning to put the pieces of the puzzle together and you can say, okay, yeah, this isn't just about sexual orientation. This is about my identity and what I see or the lack thereof when I look at myself in the mirror.
You mentioned your exposure while you were in school, in college.
Right.
Did you feel like at that time you had support groups in order for you to have those conversations as to what you were internalizing?
I don't think that I had support groups. I don't believe I had support groups until I was in like my mid 20s. So I want to say about maybe, I'll say when I moved to Houston. So in 2007. And I think that had a lot to do with the resources that are here. Houston being so much of a diverse city, it wasn't any of that I mean, to be honest, um, now that I look back at it, I knew transgender women when I was a kid, but, the old folks back there, they just call them, cross dressers, or whatever the case may be. And so it's like, shit, I mean, I didn't know exactly what that was, or they just called them gay or whatever the case may be. So it's not like I wasn't exposed to it. I just didn't have a terminology to associate myself with that.
Yeah. And, it's funny because I always like kind of question myself with that because language is powerful.
Right.
And I feel like, was the language always there? But now that I'm older, I'm matured, that I realize the language, or as society, are we just coming up with the proper language?
Right. I think that the language was always there, but I think that, of course, I mean, I can speak for myself. When we heard that language within our families and with our communities, it was always derogatory.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It was nothing empowering, or if you heard it, it was, you don't be that. You know what I'm saying? So it was, if we did have those feelings, we had to hide behind that because our families had these conversations around us as children and as young adults who let us know how they felt about it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I don't know where you're from, but I mean, my grandmother then was like, bull, dagger, dyke, this kind of stuff. And it was like, oh, no, we don't want to be none of that. Or whatever, you know what I'm saying? We don't want to be none of that. So, if you felt that way, you hid it, you didn't let them know, and, it's crazy because I think about it like, everybody in the family is like, you had that one aunt that was kind of like Butch, but never had a husband, but always came around with the same woman. You know what I'm saying? And everybody passed it off and so that just that lets me know that with this conversation is that in our community, we do not like to have conversations about things that are taboo, but there are things that they're happening and nobody wants to have that conversation about it. And that is not good for anybody's mental health. It is not, it is really, really, really not. So I think that the language was there. It was just there in a derogatory way that we just we dared not to identify that publicly within our families.
Yeah. And you've given a lot of foundation, and I know it's personal, but I do believe that's providing history. But I mean, now we're in 2020, and unfortunately, especially trans women, and correct me if I'm wrong when it comes to trans men, but especially Black trans women are usually getting beaten up or dying, So why is the Black community disregarding the trans community as a whole?
Great question. So the answer to that is because these trans women who are getting murdered and getting brutally abused, they're getting these things done by cisgender, heterosexual Black men. And so if we have the conversation, so it's like, who are we going to protect here? You see what I'm saying? If we have to have that conversation about stop murdering Black trans women, then we also have to have that conversation about the Black cisgender, quote, heterosexual men, non-binary men, whatever you want to call it, Black men who are doing this. And so we don't want to have that conversation because right now in our culture, we're in a place where Black men are being the victim, So it's kind of like a two-edged sword. Okay, so which one we gonna protect? You know what I'm saying? Are we gonna protect this cisgender Black man and his legacy and what he means to the community, or are we gonna discuss, number one, what we have not accepted, what we don't understand, what we're not educated on. So we don't want to have that conversation. It's kind of like, in a sense, and everyone gets mad when people say this, but we talk about racism, but every time somebody makes a post about, well, are we going to talk about Black on Black crime? No, we're not going to talk about that. So it's the same thing, and so we have to get to the place within a community where, one thing that I was raised to do is we're going to call an ace a ace, and we're going to call a spade a spade. And so we have to have these conversations. Hate is hate. Murder is murder. Abuse is abuse. And so we cannot keep getting on our platforms, politicians picking and choosing, because what difference as far as those who are white, who are oppressing us as a collective, what difference is it as us as a culture, we oppress other minorities within our culture? We don't want to have that conversation. And to me, this is generational. This is generational, because we have been raised in our Black families that what goes on in this house, we keep it in this house. We don't want to talk about the hard things. We don't want to talk about the molestation. We don't talk about the rape. We don't want to talk about any of those things that are going to make really the victimizers look like victims. We want to keep allowing people who victimize other people to look like victims when we feel like, oh, it's just and it's necessary.
You mentioned a lot of good points, a lot of new points, a new perspective for me. So thank you. I think what upsets me was just last week or 2 weeks ago, Ayanna Dior. You said it perfectly, right? But it's George Floyd passed away in Minnesota, in Minneapolis. Correct. And a week later, in the middle of a protest, Ayanna Dior, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. And Tony McDade.
What's the story behind him?
Tony McDade, he was killed by police officers.
Okay. And
Black trans men.
Okay. And unfortunately, this sister had a minor car accident, from what I understand, and she just got beat up by a mob of people. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I thought we were protesting for Black Lives Matter. Like, what happened?
Right. What happened? It doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. And it's like, I just posted this before we got on here. So on Hollywood Boulevard, they included all, and they did it in the trans colors, and then they put matter in just the regular LGBT colors. And so I've been seeing people put this, on the Instagram. And so I go in the comment section, and there are people of color who just say the most derogatory things about trans people, about gay people, about lesbians, about queer people, about everything. And I'm just like, I can't, you reap what you sow, and so it's just like, I don't understand how we as a community we've been oppressed on every side. Like, where did we even get that in our DNA? You know what I'm saying? To not love the children that came from your womb. You see what I'm saying? Like, where did we get that in our DNA? And so, I definitely understand, because I'm baffled too. And I think that there are a lot of people who are baffled about this. Is like there is no sense of community anymore, because there is no unity. And I say this all the time. It's just like, how can we get outsiders to respect us as a collective when we are so divided at our intersections? It is draining that it's like, and I'm going to be very honest, because, I have that intersection where, okay, do I go and protest for George Floyd because I'm Black? You know what I'm saying? Or do I not do that because I know Black cisgender people will not protest for transgender people of color? So do I not? And it's just like a tug of war. And we're not accepting people holistically. You can't, it's just like in the church where they say, well, I don't like I love your lifestyle, but I love you. No, it's just like, it's all of me. You know what I'm saying? It's all of me. You can't sit here and say, oh, well, God hates the sinner, but hates the sin. That's not even how God operates. Yeah. God loves all of you, and so I see so much in our community that, number one, we use religion as the number one key to keep us marginalizing, hating, murdering our own kind, no matter what intersection that we're at. And we keep using that as an excuse and as a crutch. And I think that we're in the year where the masks are off, and we're seeing every community, Black, white, whatever, for who they really, really are.
Yeah, I definitely believe that there's just been a lot of unveiling of truth happening during this time, beyond my wildest dreams at this point. Correct. And we're only 6 months in. I would love for you to give us a breakdown of the political and the spiritual aspects that you were referring to. And I can see the political stance just because of lots of times when it does come to legislation, I will just say gay marriage, a lot of that falls under LGBT, now Q and I. Right. But please give us your stance on the separation between the spiritual and the political needs that the community.
Well, I think for the political, just yesterday, Trump went and removed the protections for transgender healthcare. And so I know that there are a lot of people who are outraged about that. But I can tell you from living this experience that, number one, when it comes to healthcare, I mean, your employer can say whether they want to include certain things, restrictions, or exclude certain things out of their policies. And so then you have a lot of people within our community that are not even blessed to have jobs at all. You know what I'm saying? To have any kind of health care, maybe they have Medicaid or anything like this. My issue with politics across the board is that while on one side, things may be a little bit liberal, and the other side, things may be a little bit conservative. In the United States of America, though, it doesn't matter who is in office, whether it's local, whether it's state, whether it's whatever, your job in the United States is to protect the people of the United States of America. If you are a citizen and you are born on this soil, or if you gain citizenship the correct way, then your job and your duty is to have policies and procedures in place that protect the health and the well-being and the welfare of the people in the United States. That's not the white people in the United States. That's not the poor. That's not gay. That's not straight. That's the people within the United States of America. And that is why we are seeing police brutality. We're seeing all of these things because it has been clear for hundreds of years that the system hasn't been set up to protect everybody. And even with these people who don't want to say all Black lives matter, who just want to say all lives matter. Well, if you feel that way, where are the policies and the procedures and the legislator that are protecting all people? So let's just start there. Let's just start with the right for freedom, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Let's start with what this country is supposed to be founded on. Let's start there. Let's start living in that truth for once. You see what I'm saying? Where we are treating Americans like Americans and not treating Hispanics one way, blacks one way, whites one way, transgender people one way, or whatever, because guess what? In all of those spectrums, everybody's paying these high, excuse my French, ass taxes. You know what I'm saying? Or whatever. So it's like, y'all ain't dividing that up. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, hey, if we're going to work and we're doing our duty as American citizens, no matter who you are, you should be protected in this country. Your life should matter in this country. And it's not. When it comes to the spiritual aspect, I'll speak within our community because I can't speak for nobody else's community. I think that what we're seeing is a paradigm shift. And so what I mean by that is there is a shift of consciousness. And so we are seeing our generation, millennials and beyond, we are seeing the uprising, because when we were growing up, our parents, they told us you can be whatever you want to be, you can, or whatever, never did they think though that we would be just that. We would be what we want to be, whether it was go to college, whether it was become an entrepreneur or whatever, we would be that. And so we have been accustomed to view God in a way that is humanistic. And we have attributed God to have discriminations because we've made God like us instead of making us like God.
Wow.
We have made God like us. We want God to be in our image, but we have not become in God's image and in God's likeness, which was the original intent and the original plan. And so that is why you can have pastors, you can have spiritual leaders, you can have all of these people in high positions get in the pulpit, get anywhere, and say such derogatory things about a group of people that you never met. Not even only that, about a group of people that you will take their tithe money, but you won't marry them. You know what I'm saying? You will take their money and buy and build you mansions, but you won't bury them. And so we have a problem in our African American community where we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to talk about it in church. We don't want to talk about it in our homes, amongst our families, whatever. And so we've spent all of our lives shouting, but we haven't spent any of our time shifting our perspective to what the original intent of God was. And the bottom line is, he said, above all things, love. Period. There was no love, but no love only if it was love. And so that is where we got to be. We got to stop preaching religion. And if you want to preach Bible, let's preach Bible. If you want to preach spirituality, let's preach spirituality. But if it's not grounded in love, it's hate. It's no halfway. We can't be, the Bible says, be not lukewarm. You can't straddle the fence. I can't sit here and say that I love God, and then I can look at you and find any flaw in you and not accept all of you. And so we have taken on white systematic viewpoints when it comes to religion, and we're stuck in it. And it's a perpetual cycle over and over and over again. I hear people saying all the time, why do you, who taught you how to be a racist, when they're talking about white people or whatever. But the thing about it is, I don't think that nobody is just sitting down and saying, hey, kids, let's be racist or whatever. But this is the language that is going on in their homes. This is what they see in their families. And so it's the same thing in our community. We are seeing this, we're seeing it with drugs. We're seeing it with alcohol. We're seeing it with transphobia and homophobia and all of that. And so when you decide to leave from that, you're going to be the black sheep of your family. But I've always tried to figure out spiritually, how is it that you can even fix your mouth to say you love God and you kick your child out your house?
Yeah.
How can you say you love God and you have rejected the very gift that grew inside and came from you. That's spiritually, it makes no sense. And so what we have to understand is that what we see manifest in the physical is what is going on in the supernatural. And so why you're seeing so much hate manifesting in this world physically is because spiritually people are hateful. Yeah. And so it keeps coming up and it keeps coming up. And I mean, I don't mean to really get Bible, but the Bible says if my people who are called by their name will humble themselves and turn their hearts. People don't want to turn that. They want to turn your heart, but they don't want to turn their heart. Right. And we have to get to the point where, we're, number one, be real with you. Be real with you. You got to ask yourself, anybody who is listening to this and feels that they don't get it, but you have to ask yourself, why don't you get it? Why don't you understand? What is there to understand? Why is it hard for you to love another human being? Or why is it even your concern of how that person shows up in the world? Who made you God? And so when you look at the political and the spiritual, it's the same thing. You have people trying to play God. You have politics trying to play God, trying to control the masses. And you have people in religion trying to play God, trying to control people's spirit. And it doesn't work. It wasn't made to work like that. We were all created by God to be exactly who we are. And there is nothing that you can do to control that. And so if you want to stop fighting, then all we have to do is let go of the need to control other people's lives. Karen, we got to get rid of the Karens out of the world. Mind your business.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, and it's funny because I was thinking that, but I keep saying this. I'm like, for whatever reason, white people like to police stuff, right? Even if they're not in law enforcement, they just want to police everything. And that's just not the way, right?
That is not the way.
I like how you took it a level up and say, people, black or white in this case, are trying to be God. They're trying to act like God.
Absolutely.
And that's not their role.
It's not the role. And it doesn't work. It yields no fruit. It yields absolutely no fruit. It is exhausting. It's draining. And, what I always ask, there's a colloquialism that we have, hurt people hurt people. Yep. And so what we see is this vicious cycle of hurt people continuing to hurt people because, it would, I guess for some people, it's easier for them to try to control you because it prevents them from looking at the things within themselves that actually need to be fine-tuned and need to be worked on. And so, but with that, if you don't have the tenacity to control the willpower to change you, how do you think in your mind and in your rational mind that you're going to be able to control somebody else's gender identity, their sexual orientation? It's out of your control. Like it's really not difficult. It's really, really easy. It's really simple as mind your business.
Yeah.
Mind your business.
I'm curious to know, I guess during or after your, whatever, there's a lot of spiritual maturity in you, right? And I know when I was struggling with my sexuality, I was struggling with my spirituality. Can you just give us some insight on how you were able to handle that and how you've gotten to this level that you're at now?
So my mother did something that was profound that changed my life. And one day I came in the house and she was watching the L Word, okay? And I said, what are you doing? She's like, I'm just trying to understand. So we laughed about it. And so we had a brief conversation, and this was pre-transition. And so she said one thing to me. She said, if you can tell me that you went to God and prayed to God about who you are, and you can tell me that God showed you that God loves you for who you are, then I will respect that. And since that moment, I have not only learned who I am in God, but I have also learned who God is in me. Mm. And I have seen my life unfold in ways that I never dreamed of. And so I think that anybody that is struggling with that, we have to understand that our relationship with God is personal. And when my mother left this earth, no matter how much I wanted her to stay, her journey was hers. I couldn't extend it. I couldn't do any of that. And so I had to realize that my walk with God is mine. And if I understand that I am created in the image and likeness of God, then I know that there is duality in God. And so that doesn't mean that God changes, but that does mean that if I'm in him and he is in me, then there is a duality there. And so it took an awakening for me to get out of that religious mindset and brainwashing, because that is what it is. And I ask people this all the time when I speak. I say, do you believe what you believe because you believe it, or do you believe because you were told to believe it? And so when you start unpacking what you believe and what you don't believe, then you find God, because you cannot find God outside of you. And we were taught coming in our community and our culture, we were taught that God was just, sitting in the sky, writing down every time, we thought something, or whatever the case may be. But it wasn't until I had that awakening to understand, when I pray and I don't open my mouth, there is a voice that is inside of my head that speaks to me. There isn't, God don't come knock on the door. So that let me know the oneness about who I am in God and who God is in me. And so God doesn't make any mistakes, and I had to, it took a while. It took a while for me to feel worthy enough to accept that, because I think so many of us have not felt worthy. We've sat in churches that have told us that we weren't worthy of God's love. We have listened to our parents say that you're going to hell, and have given you this, grim story that they didn't even write. And what I had to understand is that my parents were the vehicle for me to get here, but they were not my creator. They was just my vehicle. They were just my vehicle. And so that is the most empowering thing that we have to understand, is that the people, your family, those are vehicles. Those are vehicles. It's just like there's a whole bunch of BMWs, but that they are separate entities of what? The creator. And so when we tap into that power of all of these things, all of my intersections, they are just vehicles. They are vehicles. But I was created. I was created to be multifaceted, but I have one creator. And so that has helped me empower myself. And in empowering myself, I've been able to empower others. But I can tell you that starting off, it's lonely. It's lonely. And I think that it's lonely, Michelle, because you have to clear out of that old energy, so you can manifest your soul tribe. And so once you start clearing out that negative energy and those old mindsets, then you begin to meet people who actually mirror your soul. And then you begin to see God in other people.
Yeah, I think that's the toughest thing about your 30s, at least for me. And then you realize you have to unlearn.
Unlearn.
You know?
Absolutely.
And I was telling a friend today, like, it wasn't until I was 32 that I felt confident, but I only felt confident because of all of the bullshit in my 20s.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, for real, like, because in your 30s, it's like you're laying down one day and you like, that shit don't even make sense. You know what I'm saying? It's like, who told me that? And it's like, yo, in my rational, educated mind, I can't even believe that I believe that, because that doesn't even make sense. Like, all of these, colloquialisms that we have and these, religious practices. And it's just like, this is dumb. And the hardest thing for me, I will tell you, was to understand the difference between religion and spirituality, because I didn't want to blame God for what people did. And I think that is the hardest thing to do in that unlearning process. It's like, okay, because once you start telling people you going on a spiritual journey, they feel like, okay, you about to be a Satanist, you burning sage, you doing witchcraft. That's the kind of stuff we hear in our community. You wearing gemstones or whatever the case may be. You just lost your ever-loving black mind, and, you in a cult or whatever, when we don't realize that the black church is one of the biggest cults there is. Christianity is one of the biggest cults there is, because anything that tells you that you can't think, breathe, and find God for yourself is a cult.
Woo! Folks ain't ready.
Oh. oh.
Folks ain't ready.
Let's just call it what it is. And so when we put all of this together, that's a great point. I think that we have all been trapped in a cult in some kind of way. Our families have become our cults. You know what I'm saying? Our communities have become our cults, because we have been taught, and we talk about, one of your questions was about systematic oppression. And I think that it has been such in our DNA, since the slave trade, and the things that have been spiritually passed on from generation to generation to generation to generation, that we didn't even come into this learning how to think for ourselves. And I think that what we're seeing with this revolution and this uprise is, you see a generation of people who are saying, I am taking my power back. Because like you said, when you get in those 30s and you done been through some shit, all you got is you. You see what I'm saying? When mama and all them start dying and bills is rolling and all of that, you really begin to understand, wait, hold on, this really about me. This was never about anybody else. This was always about me and my power. Now what I'm going to do, I'm either going to play dead, or I'm going to rise to that power and awaken to who I am and operate in all of my gifts and my talents and my purpose of what I have in this world, because life is but a vapor. We see that now. We see that people can't even lay in their bed and sleep at night without some intruder, AKA the police, coming in and taking them out of here. We see that. And so I think that is why we see so many debates going on in so many aspects in all communities, because you have the people who are still fighting to control you, and you have the people who are saying, I'm not being controlled anymore. And that's whether you black, gay, lesbian, transgender, whatever. People are rising up and walking in their power and saying, guess what? I have been held down long enough. My power is mine. My life is mine. I'm able to be who I want to be, love who I want to love, go to college, don't go to college, do all of these things. And so what you see is, you see the systematic oppressors, they are losing their grip. They are losing their grip, and they're trying to fight and hold on to that mass media mind control that says, I'm going to control whether you mad, sad, happy, this. I'm going to control your narrative. And people are rising up and saying, no, you can't control my narrative because you didn't even write it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one thing that occurred to me that you said, it's generational groupthink. Mm-hmm. It's generational groupthink that has kept us suppressed, and even I love my mom, and she's an immigrant. So that's a whole nother layer right there. But my mom was like, well, I told my Black brother, of course, if the police stop him, he needs to do this and this and this. I'm like, no, Mom, like there are men and women that are getting, one, stopped for no reason, two, are compliant, three, non-resistant, and are ending up dead. You know? And and unfortunately, Jay Farrow, the comedian, that just happened to him yesterday. And he was just walking or jogging, and he's like, oh, you fit the description. And once again, a knee. 4 cops pulled out guns, and then a knee on the back of his neck. And he said it himself.
But this is oh gosh, because this is so good. Yeah. This is so good because I wanna hit on the spiritual connotation of that. The spiritual connotation of that, and we can get into this even when we talk about these masks that we are required to wear. This is about your soul. They want our soul. They want our soul because if I take your breath, if I stop you from breathing, that's your soul. Your soul is what keeps you alive. Your breath, that's your life. And so this, if you look at it in a spiritual context, this is what is happening. They want, forget the lives. They want our soul. They want our soul. Anybody that tries to take your breath, they want your soul. And so, when I look at this, I want us, this is why it's so important that we understand that all Black lives matter. And that we cannot at this time be divided. Because the house divided against itself can't stand at all. And iron sharpens iron. And what we have to understand is that the oppressors know that their time is up. Yeah. Because we are living in the days where the Bible says the first shall be last and the last shall be first. Well, y'all been first for a long time. And it's time for you to be last. Now, the thing about it is we as a culture, we don't really just want people to be last and have nothing unlike them. You see what I'm saying? But it's time for the tables to turn because we have been at the bottom. But when you look at that from an animalistic, when you have animals that are becoming extinct, what happens? They begin to try to kill off those that are coming to overtake their territory because what? They know that their days are numbered.
Wow. Yeah.
So this is a fight. This is an animalistic fight that's saying, we know, come on, the black dollar, we got to start realizing the power that we got.
Absolutely.
That's what we got to start doing as a community, as a culture. We have to get out of this victimization image in our head, and we have to understand. That's why it's so important that we read books. They used to say back in the day, you want to keep anything from a Black person, put it in a book. We have to start reading these books. We have to stop allowing the mass to control what it is that we believe, and we have to start being seekers of truth and seekers of knowledge and really, really understanding who built not just this country, but who built this world. We have to understand that. We have to understand that we come from royalty. We have to understand that as a people. And so at this point, we don't have time to be transphobic. We don't have time to be homophobic. We don't have time to be nothing but united on every single front. That is where we need to be. That is where we need to be. In order for us to be powerful, we have to be empowered.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
We have to be.
I want you've given us a lot, but I want you to shed some light on what are some things, some issues within the trans community that we need to become aware of, and how can we support the trans community?
I think that the number one thing that we need to have is we need to continue to have these conversations. And I think that is important that as a community, you can't have conversations about groups of people who are not included in those conversations. So I think that we need to start being inclusive in our dialogue when it comes to having those conversations about trans people of color, because I can tell you that our struggles are different from our Caucasian counterparts, because they they transition and still have privilege. Okay, so we need to really have those conversations. And here's what I want people to understand about conversations. Conversations doesn't mean agreement. Understanding doesn't mean you agree. But we need to learn how to have those conversations at our intersections where we begin to comprehend one another. We have to get to a place where we can comprehend and we can form some kind of synergy, that where we say, you know what, I don't get that. I don't understand that. And if you're not that, you won't. You see what I'm saying? But that doesn't mean that you have to be exclusive. And so I think that what most transgender people of color want within our own community, we want our community to understand that we are too a part of this community. We Black, okay, and so and I think that's the same for LGBTQ. Black lesbians and whatever, because that's a whole different set of issues that it still shows up in our community. I think that education is also, if you don't understand something, if you don't know how to bake a cake, you're going to get on the internet and you're going to find out how to bake a cake. There's so much information that is out there, but we have to stop being afraid to confront things that we don't understand and then hide and remain ignorant. The only person, you're ignorant by choice. You don't have to remain ignorant. We can come together and we can have these conversations. And we need to, in those conversations, we need to be honest. I think that a lot of people don't understand that, I've sat on so many panels with people who don't understand what it's like to be a Black transgender person in America. And that's fine. But when you're honest about that, instead of covering it up with hate, then we can have those conversations and we can have that dialogue and we can get some comprehension and some understanding. But I want people, cisgender, heteronormative, religious Black folks, to understand that, what I'm about to say is really about to piss some people off, and that's fine. But if you can love your son that done sold dope and in jail, if you can love your daughter that done had 5 kids and they done got married to nobody, if you can love your husband who has slept out on you, if you can find, if y'all can find, even in scripture, if you can find somewhere in your heart to be understanding, you have to understand that Black lesbians, Black gay men, Black transgender, Black queer, Black intersex, these are your children. You got to understand that. They're yours. And so if they trans, they came from you. If they gay, they came from you. If they're a lesbian, they came from you. And so if you want to hit me with scripture, go right ahead. But the Bible says that a man who doesn't love his own home is less than an infidel. So don't think that you about to get to heaven because you didn't accepted everybody else's children, but you ain't accepted yours. Don't think that you going to get to heaven because you've accepted everybody else's community, but you ain't accepted yours. You have to love us all, whether you agree or you don't agree. you have to love us. And in loving us, you have to protect us. And in protecting us, you have to respect us. And respecting us, you have to support us. Bottom line.
I'm going to ask some questions. I want you to give us, the audience, me and the audience, some advice, right?
Okay.
What do we say to that Black man that likes trans women? And I say that to reference our earlier part of the conversation, because these are the women that are getting beat up by cisgender, quote unquote, homosexual men. So what advice would you lend to that Black man?
Love her. Love her. I'll try to make this brief, but the Black man has been the man who is not allowed to explore his sexuality. Mm-hmm. And every time that I've seen cisgender Black women who have dogged Black men and their masculinity for being attracted to trans women. When he sees that woman, he sees a woman. And so we have to allow people in all aspects, because I think they get murdered out of the shame that comes with being outed for loving a transgender woman.
What advice would you give to the parent that may see their child struggling or has even mentioned about transitioning? What advice would you give to that parent?
I would say to that parent and that child both need to go to counseling, because and it depends on the age as well. But, when you're, we see with Dwayne Wade and their daughter, that is a prime example. And I want, this was the message that I gave to my mother on her dying bed. And I want this to resonate with whoever is watching this. You did not make a mistake. It was nothing that you did. And so, accept that part first, that it was nothing that you did, and support your child. But also in supporting your child, go and you have therapy as well as a family, because not only will that child transition, you will transition with that child as well. And so I don't think that is just a mental health thing that we need to worry about for the child, but I think that it's also helpful that the parents go and get counseling so they can understand, so they can transition in a healthy way with their children.
Yeah, that's really good. That's a really good point. Once again, you have your business, Lake and Prosper. Yes. But how can people find you? How can people support you?
So you can, for my business, you can follow me at Lake and Prosper. That's LAKEAND Prosper on Instagram, or you can visit the website. That's www.lakeandprosper.com. For my personal page on Instagram, hold on, let me tell you what it is, because I just changed it so everybody will be able to find it. Give me just a second so I can tell you what that handle is. Sorry about that. Okay, so for Instagram, it is... Get me back on here. So for Instagram, it's Kaleb Elijah. That's KALEBELIJAH _speaks. SPEAKS. And so I am available pending my schedule for conferences, for Zoom meetings. If you just want to talk because you don't understand, I am available for that. I will tell you this, as long as the conversation is respectful, I am open to it. I don't deal with disrespect. I don't disrespect anyone. And so, there's a way for you to not understand, but still approach people in a respectable manner. And so I think that's very, very important.
Yeah, Kaleb, absolute pleasure. I'm so grateful that we've had this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Your story, as well as just your overall experience, you are appreciated. Hey, love, I hope you enjoyed the conversation between Kaleb and I. I just felt like it was a pure, beautiful conversation. By far, one of the best conversations I've had in my life. It's all about elevation. It's all about touching the mind, touching the heart, and elevating, transcending your thought to the point you become a better person. And I hope you are able to get that. I hope it allows you to think. I hope it allows you to love and respect people differently. Because we have to not just protect Black women, but we have to love and respect each other. That way we can preserve our community, the Black community, because all Black lives matter. Got 5 more episodes to go. I'm really excited. Thank you for staying with me. And remember, personal connection leads to influential network. Thanks for networking with Michelle.